Who are the people in your life that really know you? In today's episode, we're going to find out that God really knows us. And when God says that He really knows us, He says, I know what you do. I know why you do what you do. And I know why you're suffering in the way that you're suffering. Listen to me. I might be repeating something in your life.
Welcome to Everyday Truth with Kurt Skelly. We believe the Bible is true and relevant to everyone, everywhere, every day. If today's conversation is a help to you, take a moment to leave a review or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening. Now, let's join Kurt for today's episode.
Welcome back, friends. Appreciate you joining us today for our podcast. We are in Hosea chapter number, let me see here, where are we? We're in chapter 4 today, chapter 5 rather, finished chapter 4 last episode. And I forgot to tell you, but the story of Hosea is really told in the first 3 chapters. And then in the ensuing chapters of the book of Hosea, we have a collection of his sermons, the ministry of Hosea. You see panoramically in the scriptures that follow. So here we are in Hebrews. Well, it starts with an H at least, and I'm tired. Hosea, chapter number 5. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, we're going to hear some of the same themes reiterated. And is that not what the Lord does in your life and in my life? He reiterates the things that we need to hear. And I would say this, if you're hearing repetition in your life from the Lord, then you ought to pay special attention. When the same themes seem to come up in conviction in your heart, when you're listening to a podcast like this, or when you're going to church, listening to messages or Bible studies, when you're reading the Bible on your own, when you're just having quiet time and collecting your thoughts, if the same things keep on coming back, then don't dismiss that, because the Lord often works in a way by which He repeats things in our life. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Remember that? Jesus repeated that to Peter for emphasis. Now, look at Hosea chapter 5, verse number 1, where he speaks to the leadership and says, "Hear ye this, O priests, and hearken, ye house of Israel, give ye ear, O house of the king." So he's speaking to the nation, but in speaking to the nation, he's speaking in and through the leadership. It reminds me of the way Jesus spoke to those churches of Asia Minor in Revelation chapters 2 and 3. Unto the angel of the church, write. The messenger, probably the pastor of the church was what he called that messenger. The point is that Jesus spoke to the institution by speaking first to the leadership. That's the way God often works in our lives. So priests, king, listen, for judgment is toward you, because you have been a snare unto Mizpah and a net spread upon Tabor. In other words, your behavior is causing others to trip up. Mizpah was a city located in the tribe of Benjamin, which ironically is in the southern kingdom. Tabor, I think here refers to Mount Tabor, or the region in the Galilee. But the point is that when leaders aren't doing right, when leaders aren't leading right, then they make it difficult, well nigh impossible for the people that are following them to serve the Lord. It's like their disobedience and their bad decision-making is ensnaring, setting a trap for those who would call them leader. Look at verse number 2. And the revolters are profound to make slaughter, though I have been a rebuker of them all. So this rebellious, violent demeanor and disposition on the part of God's people continues in spite of the fact that God has rebuked them. And to me, that is the way that real rebellion can be detected. And that is when people persist in their sinful behavior in spite of repeated verbal warning. So the Lord is saying, I've rebuked you. We've been over this before. I've told you, and you continue to do the wicked things, the outlandishly wicked things that you've been doing. That, my friends, is a sign of advanced stage sin. When we're acting in outward disobedience, that presupposes that there's been a breakdown in our thinking, there's been a breakdown in our heart, there has been a period of time that we've allowed ourselves to become hardened to the voice of God. If I'm already doing it, whatever it happens to be, then that ought to be an indication to me that I'm in the advanced stages of sin. Because if I'm acting upon it, it presupposes a whole lot that's been going on underneath the ground before that thing ever shot out from the ground. Look at verse number 3. I know Ephraim, and Israel is not hid from me. I know Ephraim. In other words, I intimately know. I know how he thinks. I know who he is. He's my son. I've raised him. Remember, Ephraim and Israel here are used interchangeably, but they're terms of endearment that God has for the northern kingdom. I know Ephraim, and Israel is not hid from me. For now, O Ephraim, thou committest whoredom, and Israel is defiled. They will not frame their doings to turn unto their God, for the spirit of whoredoms is in the midst of them, and they have not known the Lord. So think about a couple of the things that the Lord just said here. He said, first of all, I know you. I know everything about you. I know why you do what you do, and I know why you're getting yourself into a world of sinful trouble. And here's why. Because you have not framed your doings to do right. Isn't that what it said? Verse number 4, they will not frame their doings to turn unto their God. So to frame one's doings, that's kind of a nebulous way to say it. But it means you've not ordered your life in such a way to make it easier to turn to God. You've not set patterns and habits. You've not put actionable steps in your life to turn to God. And here's why. Because the spirit of whoredoms is in you. So God is saying your actions, your schedule, your habits, your choices are really an indication of what's driving you. And what's driving you is not your intimate knowledge of God, not your desire to please Him, but actually what's driving you is this spirit of whoredom, this inordinate lust that says, I want to have something that doesn't belong to me. I want to satisfy my sinful and sensual desires. And in this case, the spirit of whoredom is referred to their idolatry. You just want to do what you want to do, and therefore your decision-making about how you set your schedule, what you're doing, you're not framing your doings. I think it's important for us to point out here that just because we do on the outside that which appears to others to be spiritual, like I go to church and I read my Bible and I don't do that and I don't wear that and I don't say that and I don't watch that, that doesn't necessarily mean that you know God. There can be a behavioral moralism that is put on, like we can staple fruit onto a tree. That doesn't make a tree organic. It doesn't mean that tree is fruitful. But the point here that God is making is that the framing of your doing ought to be a natural reaction of what your heart is. And as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And so what God is saying is here, looking at you from the outside to the inside, you're rotten to the core. I see in your actions that you're not framing your doings to turn to God. But I see on the inside, the reason for that is because you have a desire to satisfy your own lusts ahead of a desire to know God and to allow that experiential knowledge of God to drive your decision-making and ultimately your behavior. Would you look at verse number 5? It goes on to say about these people, and the pride of Israel doth testify to his face. That's just a fancy way of saying they are full of themselves. They have a spirit of arrogance. Therefore shall Israel and Ephraim fall in their iniquity. They're going to be burdened and weighed down by their sinful choices. Judah also shall fall with them. So this is a long-standing prediction, because what God says here is ultimately you're going to be brought down, and you're only going to have one person to blame for that, and that one person is you. Your iniquity will bring you down. Why? Because sinful choices have consequences already built into them. And so it is your iniquity that's bringing you down. You can blame others and you can point at ways that you feel that you are mistreated or things that you claim are not fair, but ultimately it is your iniquity that will cause you to fall, and that'll happen to Judah too. Now, it didn't happen to Judah until a generation or two later, actually 3 or 4 generations later, when they fell to the Babylonians. But the fact is, they fell as well. Why? Because sin uncared for becomes an unliftable weight. Sin uncared for becomes an unliftable weight in our life. It will ultimately bring us down. That's why we have to keep short accounts with the Lord. Take your burden to the Lord, leave it there. Casting all your care upon him. Casting my burden upon him, he will sustain you. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Don't let sin stack up in your life. And they just did not respond to the repeated pleadings of God in their lives. I'm going to have to stop there in verse number 5, and we'll just pick it up right there in verse number 6 next time. Wow. Can't believe that time goes by so quickly, but the Bible is so rich, isn't it? And I'm glad that you've joined us for today's episode. Looking forward to tomorrow. Until then, God bless you, my friends.